So our team plan from this point going forward is we're going to have our artists do more animations for the enemy types and more animations for the cutscenes that we're going to have in between the levels. And our other artist is going to work on doing more modeling and texturing for different level types and the enemy types. And for our programming, what we're going to do is we're going to do a total redesign and refactor of our existing code, because it would be easier to rewrite and do it the right way now that we've had experience in seeing that there's a lot of stuff that we could have done better. So now we're going to take the time to rewrite it, make it better. It'll be quicker the second time around that we write it, and it'll be easier to add more code from that point going forward. And we're going to program more enemies and better structures and methods of giving those enemies behavior and interacting in the environment. The setting for the game is based in a futuristic dystopia where there's robots and technology. We were able to achieve a high contrast between light and dark by using emissive shaders on light emitting objects in our scenes. We aren't using normal maps in our game because we're not concerned about fine details, since we're going for a cartoon art style. So for the first script, we have the player control script. The player control script is kind of like a manager script for the player. It takes input, and based on the input, it updates the rigid body of the player to do stuff like jumping or moving around. And it also updates the animator component so that we can play animations for moves or running or jumping. And it also takes input so that we can perform combat functions like throwing a shuriken, and then it also handles collision so that we can take damage. And it uses audio clips to play sound effects. So the player control script is kind of like a giant wrapper for all that functionality. And this is the camera control script, which we use to control our third-person camera in the game. And it uses ray casting to make sure that it doesn't clip through any mesh objects in our scenes. And we have options for using a mouse control or using a game controller. And we can change the distance the camera is away from the player or the speed that it rotates, and whether or not we want to invert the camera. Here's the player stat script, where we have separated all of the variables and properties from the player that need to be managed, and then the player accesses them through this script. Things like health and stamina, the number of lives, and the number of shurikens. all of that is managed through this script here. And here we have the base enemy script, which is the parent class script for the Mook Ninja and the drone enemy, and also the boss. The things that are common between all of the different enemies is activating the health bar and being targeted by the player when the player targets an enemy. Also checking distance between the player and itself so that it can perform the right behaviors. And also taking damage and dying are common to this script file. Here we have the Mook Ninja enemy, and the Mook Ninja is really basic. All he does is play sound effects when he performs certain actions or he receives damage. And then really all he does is check the distance from the player, and if he's further away than the attack range, he sets his nav mesh destination to the player's position, and then when he is within range, he plays animation to attack. Here we have the drone enemy, and the drone enemy is similar to the Mook Ninja in how it's really simple. Mostly what it does is it just flies around and stays a certain range away from the player and just shoots projectiles just to annoy the player. So it plays a more defensive role as an enemy, except for it has a bit of a delay in backing up from the player so that the player can actually go up to the drone and attack it and destroy it. And he can also hit it with shurikens when he targets it. And here we have the boss script, and the boss is our most advanced enemy that we have. He has the most different states and behaviors. So a lot of this code here is to handle different variables that we need to adjust during the states. And we're probably thinking that we're going to separate this out into a different script, because we should be able to have states be customizable separate from the enemies that are going to use them, because it's just a lot cleaner that way. So the different attacks that our boss has is an explosion attack for when the player is within a certain range that's close to the boss. He'll do an explosion, kind of as a defensive attack. Then our player has a sword lunge attack where he lunges towards the player and attacks him with a sword, which is an offensive attack, and that happens when you're in sort of a medium range with the boss. And then the boss has a projectile attack where he kind of keeps a distance a little bit from the player and shoots projectiles at the player. And then in between all these attack states, after the boss is done with a certain attack state, he'll go to a recover state, so that way the player has a chance to attack the boss.